Hey everyone, welcome to the Living and Active Word podcast. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about arguments and comparing ourselves with others. Let's go back to verse 22 and we'll read until verse 26. After these things, Jesus and his disciples came into the land of Judea, and there he remained with them and baptized. Now John also was baptizing in Aenon near Salim, because there was much water there. And they came and were baptized, for John had not yet been thrown into prison. Then there arose a dispute between some of John's disciples and the Jews about purification. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who is with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him. And we'll stop right there for today. So let's put all these pieces together. Jesus is baptizing. He had been spending time with his disciples. And at the same time, these two ministries are overlapping. John is also baptizing, and many are coming to John. They keep on coming to him. And then John the apostle, or John the beloved, writes this note in verse 24. For John had not yet been thrown into prison. This verse helps readers get a time reference because the other synoptic gospels do not give us these events that were happening in the life of John the Baptist. Now in verse 25, it says, there arose a dispute between some of John's disciples and the Jews. And what was their dispute or their argument about? It was about purification. We aren't quite sure what the details of the argument were about, and we don't necessarily know whether it was good or bad that they were arguing. And that brings up a question. Is it okay for a Christian to argue? Is it okay for a Christian to dispute? And I would say the answer is yes. The Bible doesn't call us to always be silent, but you don't have to go around picking fights, but you should be ready to fight. Like Jude 3 tells us, Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you, exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith, which was once for all delivered to the saints. Barnabas and Paul argued with the Judaizers in Acts chapter 15, and it even says it was no small dispute. It was no small argument. It was a big argument. We even have Jesus as our great example. He was often contending with the Pharisees. Why? Because truth really does matter. I think that's sufficient evidence enough. If Jesus, the captain of our salvation, the captain of our faith, if he was often contending or arguing with others, that there's ground for us to be in that place. Paul says in Ephesians, let your speech always be seasoned with grace. It is important how we conversate and talk to other people. Let us be fruitful in our arguments. However, there are times when we should avoid arguments, like in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 23. But avoid foolish and ignorant disputes, knowing that they generate strife. And in Titus 3:9, Paul tells Titus, but avoid foolish disputes, genealogies, contentions, and striving about the law, for they are unprofitable and useless. So there's a time to speak up, and there's a time to avoid arguments. And it all comes to the leading of God, leading of the Spirit, when you should open up your mouth, when it's necessary to argue, and when it's necessary to quiet yourself and walk away if you have to. Now, after they're done disputing, they go to John the Baptist and they say, Rabbi, he who is with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him. And the way this is written, it seems as if this is a problem for John's disciples. They're so zealous for John the Baptist that they become jealous of Jesus' ministry. They become jealous that people were flocking to him as other translations put it. Remember this, that comparing yourself to others is only going to hurt you and possibly others. This is an example of how we should not live. We should not live by comparing ourselves to other people and their ministries and what God is doing in their lives. God knows best, and He knows what to give us and what not to give us. So trust Him and rejoice in what God is doing in other people's lives. Because John's disciples missed the big picture. They forgot what was to be front and center, and that was Jesus. And it's always going to be Jesus. So learn from John's disciples that we should not be comparing ourselves to others, but trusting in what God is doing in other people's lives. That He's supposed to be the front and center of our lives and what we do and what we're about. Thank you for listening, and God bless.